Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Business Spotlight podcast. I know today you're going to be really excited about our guest. We have Tom Truitt, who works for Turnkey ZRG, right? Did I get that right, Tom?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so he's got a very interesting story to tell about his journey and about the role that he's playing right now in the music industry as a recruiter, a headhunter, and how he started in that role in a different industry, made a pivot to a completely different role, and then came back, and then now serves as like the point man for recruiting and talent search within the music industry. So, Tom, so happy to have you here today. Appreciate you taking a few minutes to, spend some time with us and give our community some inspiration with your journey and what challenges you've overcome and what success you've enjoyed.
Well, Craig, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to talk to you. I don't know how inspiring it will be for your audience, but I'm certainly willing to share anything you want to know about my very interesting, meandering career of 30 plus years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I don't know if it's true for you, but it seems like half of the people, at least half of the people I know, are in Nashville because they started out wanting to be in the music business. Either they had some talent or they had some connection, and then they ended up changing it to a different role. So I'm certain that this episode and this content here will be enjoyable for them. But
It's interesting. I always refer to Nashville as the Olympic Village of music. And what I mean by that is the world's best come here, meaning world's best writers, producers, players. And many of them, when they arrive here, they go, whoa, I didn't realize that the level of talent here was so high. And they realize I don't have it, but I want to be in the music industry somehow, some way. And they pivot to working in the music industry as opposed to being a performer or perhaps, a rock star, so to speak. So Nashville is very unique in that regard.
And you know what? I think, Tom, that's what gives Nashville its vibe. There's just, like you say, there's this core of extremely talented musicians, but then it brings others who kind of work on the periphery, and it just creates a presence here, a resonance here that is unlike any other place. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. And if you think about it, we've got the music business here, but we also have the creative part of Nashville here. In other words, think of us, we're really Hollywood of music. So, our waiters and waitresses and our Uber drivers, they're not actors and actresses, they're aspiring musicians and songwriters.
Right.
And so many of them come here chasing that dream, and some of them do obviously fulfill those dreams, but many, many others don't because they're just not good enough, unfortunately. But they still are part of the community and contribute in a way that they can and try to make a living doing something adjacent to being on stage.
Right. Which is, well, let me share this one thought. Did you happen to watch Ken Burns's country music?
Oh, absolutely.
Special? Yeah.
Incredible.
Oh my gosh. You would talk about an inspiration to go back and learn the roots and the origins of the music as no one else can share. Ken Burns to me, that's a masterpiece. I love it. But when you talked about the combination of creativity and music business being here in Nashville, I can't remember who actually pointed that out during the series, but that's what made Nashville what it is the combination of those two things. And I just found that very intriguing. But and then of course your background, and now that we've diverted away from the topic, but kind of given a broad brush here, you're not unlike the waitresses, and others who are have aspired to be in the business industry or in the music industry, but you self-admittedly don't have the talent that
not a bit.
Not a bit of it, which I find really cool, man.
I can't write, I can't sing, I can't play, but you will never meet a bigger fan of the creator or the content than me. And this goes way back to when I was basically a teenager and I started going to concerts. I grew up in Virginia,
Hmm.
And the very first concert I ever went to, I was about 13 years old. I was just smitten with the whole thing.
Hmm.
And basically got enamored with live music, and it's something that has filled my soul for the better part of the last 45 years.
Right.
But in all reality, I never dreamed that I could make a living doing what I love. And sadly, it took me till I was about age 40 to figure it out. I'm glad I finally figured it out, but I wish I had figured it out when I was 20 instead of 40.
Hmm. So, um, who was your first concert? Who did you go see?
A band you may have never even heard of, a band called Pablo Cruz.
Oh, of course, Pablo Cruz. That's like mid 70s, maybe.
Yeah, but right, the first show I went to was 1976, and
Yeah.
you're dating us now, Craig, because
Well, yeah, I learned that from my dad.
we have this gray hair for a reason, don't we?
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, I remember Pablo Cruz. I don't remember them ever being on tour, but
Oh yeah.
and the first concert I think I saw maybe was, I don't know, was it Aerosmith or I can't
Oh,
even remember.
what a
But
great one! That was the first record I ever bought. I love to
oh,
ask that question to people. What was the first concert, and what was the first record you ever purchased with your own money? Mine was Aerosmith Dream On. What was
yeah.
yours?
Oh my gosh. And the first record, I'm sad that I can't even remember it. That's terrible. But I do remember Dream On. I had a good friend who turned me on to the album.
Yeah,
And oh my gosh, that was just a great album,
yeah.
from start to finish. But yeah, those are the good old days, man.
The
Um,
70s.
yeah, the 70s. You know what? I never listened to the Allman Brothers until like the late 70s. And I had the same friend turn me on to the Allman Brothers. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And of course, especially when Dwayne was part of the group. And after he died, they changed. Their music kind of changed a little bit, but it's really, I don't know, it's fascinating to listen to music that you missed, and somebody introduces you to it and you just kind of fall in love with it.
Allman Brothers are a bedrock band for me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Foundational.
I couldn't agree with you more. But so so we've got people on the edge of their seat. How did you start out, and how did you become well, you were a headhunter in a different industry, and then made a pivot, then another pivot, and then
Yeah.
you're doing the work of your dreams. How did all that happen?
Well, how much time do you have? Um, so I'll try to condense many years into just a couple of minutes, but the short version is I was recruited to come to Nashville in 1990. I was happily single living in Atlanta. I was a stockbroker. And in 1989, a company that I had spent 3 summers during my college career working for, a company called the Southwestern Company here in Nashville, called me up out of Atlanta and said, "Hey, we're launching an executive search division of this company. We want you to come up here and help us launch it." And my initial reaction was, no, thank you. Heck no. I had enough of Nashville and Southwestern during college. I'm happily living in Atlanta, which at that time, Atlanta was amazing. In fact, 1980s Atlanta is very similar to modern day Nashville.
Hmm.
If you like present day Nashville, you would have loved Atlanta in the 80s, which I did. Anyway, long story short, I after many months of courting, I agreed reluctantly to come up here, and the original commitment was only for 6 months. I agreed to come here, learn the business, because I wanted to get back to Atlanta as fast as I could to open an office for the company down there, put everything in storage down there, moved here, and 2 weeks later, I met my wife.
Hmm.
And we've been married for 33 years now. And, I always kind of kid her that I stepped in Nashville and I can't get it off my shoe. But the reality is, I spent 12 really great years at Southwestern building a very meaningful search business. And Craig, in those days, my book of business, my focus was in management consulting and technology. This was the
Hmm.
90s. This was the first internet boom. Honestly, there were days in the mid 90s when I'd look at my team and go, I can't believe they pay us to do this. the supply and demand inequality for what we were doing was so stacked in our favor. It was crazy. But the reality is I really had no passion for the people I was interfacing with every day on the phone. The people on the other end of the line were just not that interesting to me. They were very smart. They made a lot of money. The companies were, McKinsey, Bain, Booz Allen, Ernst and Young, KPMG, Anderson Consulting. These were the biggest, highest value management consulting firms out there. But at the end of the day, I just really wasn't that excited about talking to those people every single day. And after 12 years, there were a couple of things that happened. Number one was the tech bubble burst. Number two was 9/11. And then number three, the reality that I was managing about 60 people all day at work. I felt like all I was doing was changing diapers, only to have to go home and do it for real, because at that point in my life, my kids were in diapers. And the confluence of those factors, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired. I'm kind of burned out. I kind of went through a midlife crisis in a way, but at 35 years old, that's too early to go through a midlife crisis. But the fact of the matter is, I decided I was done. I sold out of my interest in that company, and I had a 1-year non-compete that I had to satisfy, which I did by leaving recruiting altogether. And I went into the toy industry. Have you ever played the board game Cranium?
You mentioned that to me the other day. I don't think I played it, but I do remember it. It had a pretty strong presence, didn't
Oh
it?
my God. Cranium
Yeah,
was the hottest game on the planet for about 10 years. And I
yeah.
was very fortunate to get on that fast moving train when I did. My business partner and I effectively were the sales force for Cranium, which meant we were responsible for putting Cranium and Cranium related products on every retail shelf that you can name, which meant me getting on an airplane day after day, flying all over Kingdom Come, calling on everything from Target and Walmart, Kmart, Sears, J.C. Penney, Barnes and Noble, Borders, Meyer, Fred Meyer, Starbucks, you name it, Costco. I had to call on every retailer you can think of, which was fun and interesting at the time. My children thought I was a rock star because dad was in the toy business. But the reality is, dad was killing himself. Dad was, just on too many airplanes and in too many hotels. And in 2007, I came home from a long international trip. I put my bags down and I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. My Stick a fork in me. I'm done. And my wife was like, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, honey, I want to go to work in the music industry. And Craig, she looked at me like I had three heads. I was like, what do you know about the music business? I said, I don't know anything about the music business, but I know I am a passionate fan of music. Surely there's a way for me to make a living doing that. And so what did I do? I kind of started taking meetings with anyone who I could find that would talk to me about the music industry. And so in April of '07, I had a series of meetings with very senior Music Row executives. And early in every one of these meetings, I would ask the same question, and that is, who are the go-to headhunters in this field? Because if I'm going to find a job, I need to find that company or that person. Who is he? Where is he? Who is she? Where is she? And everyone kept telling me the same thing over and over, and that is, Tom, I've never heard of that. I don't think that exists. I don't think that company is out there. And that was so confusing to me because every industry has its rock star recruiters. I know this from firsthand experience. I know this because I was one of those in management consulting. It doesn't matter if it's real estate or medicine or law or accounting or finance. There is a recruiter or maybe multiple recruiters that are sort of the go-to people, right? Well, music didn't really have that. And all the friends that were telling me, that weren't lying to me, they were telling me the truth. So basically in the spring of '07, I decided I'm going to try to become that person. And I launched a little business called Music Row Search. And when I say little, I mean really little. I rented a little room in the RCA building on Music Row. I could almost touch the walls by extending my arms, out like that. I was in there with all these little song pluggers and music publishers and everything. And I went to work. And in '07, I don't know if you were aware of what was happening in the music industry in '07, but Napster had already burned the building to the ground. Napster had already, you know, decimated the music industry. And I decided to launch a music industry search firm in the teeth of that. Once again, people looked to me like I had three heads. And I went to work and I just started doing what I know to do more than, frankly, anybody I know. And that is, I'll pick up the phone and call anyone. And I finally found my very first search, which I was blessed to find as a result of doing some networking on Music Row. I came across a friend of mine named Scott Safford, who at that time was launching his own law firm. And I said, "Hey, man, do you know anybody hiring right now in the music industry?" And he basically goes, "Yeah, one of my law school, classmates works for Beyonce's management company down in Houston. I think
Hmm.
they're looking for somebody." I was like, "Who is he? What's his name? Give me his name and number." So I call this guy out of left field. His name is Brad Turcotte. At that time, Brad was the head of marketing for Beyonce's management company.
Hmm.
And I said, "I understand you may be looking for a digital marketing executive. I'm your guy. Can I help you find that person?" Brad retained me to do that search, and that was the launch of Music Row Search 17 years ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
To this day, Brad Turcotte remains a good friend, and every time I see him, I hug him and thank him for helping me launch.
That is fantastic, man. That is fantastic. And he's still a friend and still, I assume, a client too, probably, right? When he's in
Uh,
need, or has he moved on to another role?
oh, he's been in numerous big roles in the industry. He's not been a
Hmm.
client. I've actually tried to place him a few times
Oh, really?
in
Okay.
jobs, but no, I've actually never done any more business with him, but he does remain a great friend.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so, yeah, well, yes, I forgot about Napster and the effect that it had on the music industry, but there was as well, some economic turmoil happening at about that time too.
Oh,
Uh,
well, that's part of my story as well. So I launched my little business in '07, have a really great year in '07, had the start to a great year in '08. And the summer of '08 comes around and the financial meltdown, subprime industry
mhm,
implodes. Needless to say, my business implodes with it. I
I'm sure.
And it was like flicking a light switch. I mean,
Hmm.
all the searches that I had underway were frozen. Any of the search discussions that I had with companies that were getting ready to launch searches were halted. And needless to say, my wife was very, very concerned about the decision that I had made to leave a
Hmm.
very lucrative career in the toy industry to launch this, dream of being in the music industry. I was
Hmm.
like, "Honey, I got this. I got this." If you've been married a long time, Craig, you've probably told your wife a few times,
Oh yeah,
"Honey, I got this. I got
yeah,
this."
of course.
Well, I figured it out. I've always introduced myself as the luckiest guy you've ever met, and I can cite numerous reasons for saying that. But one of those examples took place in August of '08. I got a phone call from a guy I hardly knew in Nashville who invited me to come watch a video being shot. And I
Mhm.
was like, "Sure. What else? I got nothing better to do. My search business is blown up. Yeah. Where am I going? What am I doing?" He said, 2 o'clock Tuesday afternoon. Here's the address. And so, Craig, I go to what I think is going to be a big video production, meaning with lots of people and pretty women and craft services and equipment and, like a production, right?
Mhm.
I go to some dingy little basement in the outskirts of Antioch. Brentioch is what it's called in Nashville.
Right.
I couldn't even take you there today. I don't even remember exactly where it was. But it's August, it's hot as hell outside. I walk into this basement and I see two guys from the band Sawyer Brown at the other end of the room.
Mhm.
And I'm looking around going, "What in the world have I walked into? What is this?" Their guys are standing in front of a green screen and they're dressed in Christmas attire. And I whispered to the guy who invited me, like, "Why did you invite me to this?" And he said, "Sit down and shut up." Like a scolded schoolboy, I go sit in the corner and I'm watching these guys from Sawyer Brown go through a seemingly endless number of takes of this video, which is about a 60-second video. It's more or less a PSA, and it has two purposes. They're thanking their fans for 25 years of support. It's their 25th anniversary, and they're launching a Christmas CD later this year. And so they go through all these takes, they get the video they want, and then they come over to me and say, the reason we invited you to this is we need your help.
Hmm.
Oh, can I do for you? Starving entrepreneur that I am. They said, we need to get this video edited and distributed to country radio station program directors around the country.
Hmm.
The guy who invited me thought I could do that. I was like, yeah, I can do that. Craig, for you and your listeners, I had no idea exactly how I was going to do what they were asking me to do. But once again, being a starving entrepreneur, I knew I had to figure it out. And I figured it out pretty quickly. But really, what that little project allowed me to do was launch a new idea, at least new to me at the time. And that is, rather than two legacy country stars standing in front of a green screen, why couldn't that be someone else in front of that green screen? This is where the headhunter in me took over.
Hmm.
Why we were in the worst job market in the history of the world at that moment in time. The financial crisis was in full meltdown. The economy had totally collapsed. Worst job market in the history of the world. Why couldn't that be a job seeker standing in front of that green screen
Hmm.
and tell a story? In other words, a visual resume. So, in other words, I
Hmm.
launched a little business called Your Elevator Pitch.
Hmm.
And we would have the service we would script your resume for you. So, hi, I'm Craig
Wow.
Whipperman. For the last 10 years, I've been involved in blah, 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 blah. And what we would do is edit your video for you and provide it to you. And then the real secret sauce was then we would help you embed that into an HTML email and send that out to hiring authorities around the world or
Oh,
around the
wow.
country. And all of a sudden, your job search would have some analytics attached to it. You would know who got my video, did they watch it, how many times did they watch it, and maybe most interestingly, did they forward it on to anyone else?
Hmm.
So, for instance, if you sent your video to Bank of America and you see that someone at Bank of America watched it 4 times and then they forwarded it on to 3 other email addresses also at Bank of America, all of a sudden you'd go, someone at Bank of America is interested in me. I'm going to
Mhm.
see if I can't land an interview, right?
Yeah.
Bada bing, bada boom.
Wow.
Anyway, it was a really great idea at that time. And long story short, it was a kind of a novel idea, but it had a scalability problem.
Hmm.
And the one of the smartest things I ever did in those days was I did a deal with a company on Music Row called Studio Now. Studio Now became my back end. Studio Now had a network of 1,500 independent filmmakers spread out across the country. So
Mhm.
if I sold you a video in Huntsville, Alabama, you weren't coming to Nashville to be filmed, nor was I going to Alabama to film you. Studio Now would walk in the door at your office or your home at the appointed time with the equipment to film that video.
Hmm.
That enabled my little company to take off in a really great way.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
fast forward about a year, Studio Now made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and that was to become head of sales.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'll admit to you, as an entrepreneur, initially I resisted. Initially, I
Mhm.
was like, oh, I don't want a full-time job. I got a great idea. It's working. It's working slowly, but it's working. But when my wife got wind of the opportunity and the offer that they were giving me, I cut a deal with her. And I said, honey, I know you want me to take that job because there's a lot of security there. They're offering me benefits. They're offering me a salary and stock and all these other great things. But if I don't have a certain amount of money in our checking account by your birthday this year, that was October 31st of 2008, I said, I'll take that job. So needless to say, on November the 1st, 2008, I became the head of sales of Studio Now in
Wow.
Nashville. And literally 3 months later, we sold the whole thing to AOL.
Oh, wow.
So did I mention I'm the luckiest guy you've ever met?
Yeah.
I go from being a nearly divorced homeless entrepreneur to the head of sales of Studio Now to the head of sales of AOL Video, all in the span of about 90 days.
Wow.
It was a terrific stroke of luck for me.
Wow.
And I will always be indebted to my friends at Studio Now and AOL for that opportunity. Now, here's the funny part. The next 4 years, I'm now a dog and pony for AOL, which means I'm back on airplanes almost
Mm,
every week, back and forth to New York, back and forth to LA, preaching the AOL video gospel. I never killed Music Row Search. Music Row Search was on the back burner,
mm,
but from the years of 2010 to 14, I would receive inquiries from companies needing to hire music executives. And I
mm,
would tell each and every one of those companies the same thing. Hey, I can fill that for you, but it will have to be on nights and weekends. I have a daytime job. I'm not going to conflict with my employer. But if you want me to fill any of those jobs, here's my retained search agreement. No negotiating, take it or leave it. So I would very quietly do, 2, 3, 4, 5 searches a year. Basically, it put my children through school.
oh, wow.
Fast forward to the summer of 14, I nearly dropped dead. I have quadruple bypass surgery, totally out of left field. Craig, you've never met me in person, but I am in great shape. I'm a non-smoker. My cholesterol is very low, but genes being what they are, I was a walking time bomb thanks to both of my grandfathers and never
Wow.
knew it.
Wow.
And I'm laying in the hospital in summer of 14, and I call one of my music industry mentors and heroes, a guy named Jim Griffin. And I was like, hey, dude, guess where I am? And guess what happened to me last week? We have this long meaning of life conversation. And Jim says, you know what? You don't know how much time you've got left on this earth. You need to get back to music, and you need to get back to music right away. He basically challenged me to relaunch Music Row Search in earnest. And he was absolutely right, which is exactly what I did. And since 2014, I've been going about my business, and I am the luckiest guy in the world to now say that I became that guy that is the guy in the music industry. Looking, if you're looking for a job or you need a headhunter in the music industry, it takes very little work to find me on Google.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
That's awesome,
and
man. I didn't know
so
that
here I
about
am.
your physical health, being such a, part of the impetus. It's really funny. You've had, you kind of had that in the back of your mind. You obviously saw a need. Um, then the economy hit, I'll say. Then you were fortunate enough to, be bought out and be ahead of sales, and then go back into that grind that you really didn't like in your first job, right? Your first headhunter job. You didn't like that grind, being on the plane all the time. Um, and then it takes this big kind of life change to like, and then your friend telling you that you need to go back to then continue on being on the path of being the luckiest guy in the world. It's
I
just,
can I can cite so many other reasons for telling you I'm the luckiest guy. I am. Um, when you're laying in a hospital bed after your chest has been opened up and they pull your heart out and put it on your belly and work on it for 6 hours and quad bypass, it sort of changes you. You sort of look in the mirror and start to take account of things a little bit differently, and you
wow.
realize, one, your mortality. You realize, I don't know how much time I have left. I was 50 years old when that happened, by the
Oh,
way.
wow.
And all of a sudden, it just brings some things into focus
Yeah.
and makes you realign your priorities. And
Yeah.
I wanted to get back to what I'm most passionate about, and that's
Yeah.
music.
Yeah.
Music
That's
fills
awesome.
my soul more than anything,
Yeah. And
especially live music.
so especially live. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And you know what? A lot of people think about Nashville and think about country music, and of course that's the heart and soul, I guess. And that's where it started. But there's so much, oh my gosh, there's so much music around here. On any day of the week, you can go listen to any type of music, and that's what I love about Nashville. And I'm sure you get exposed to all those different genres as well. And you're probably like me, you like any genre of music. In my case, maybe one or two don't really pique my interest as much as the others. But what's your favorite? Uh, what's your favorite genre of music?
Hands down, jam bands. I was fortunate to be introduced to the Grateful Dead in 1985, and that's when I really leaned into the music business. When I went to my first Grateful Dead concert and I looked around, I was like, "Oh, wow! That's what this is. And
Hmm.
I saw so much community and passion. You talk about a passionate fan base. There's not a more passionate fan base on earth than Deadheads.
Yeah.
And that first Dead show in November of 1985 changed my life and
Wow.
put me on the path that I've been on now for, the last, several decades. Fish is my favorite band presently.
Hmm.
Fish is about the only band that I'm going to get on an airplane to go see as a solo act. I go to festivals all the time to see many bands at one time, but Fish is the one band that I'm going to jump an airplane to go see.
That's awesome.
But to your question, I love all music. There's
Hmm.
not bad music.
Right.
Music is, to each his own. But
Yeah.
I am blown away by the person that can sit on a stage and play a musical instrument live in front of people, whether it's a piano, a horn, a guitar, a bass. I'm just enamored with it
Yeah.
because I can't do it. I mean, I
Yeah.
can't. I've tried. I can't do it.
And then you sit there in awe. A thought just entered my mind. Have you ever, by the way, been out to the Blue Moon picking party out at Percy Warner Park out there?
Sure.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
Isn't
it's
it cool?
it is very cool. I mean, the stage is very, what would you say, humble. It's just very simple, and everybody's out there on a Friday night. The families are out there enjoying it, and yeah, okay, there's a band on the stage, but over at the stables, there's a bunch of local people just all hanging out, picking bluegrass. And you got one group over here and a small group over there, and you can just, I mean, it's like a smorgasbord. And these people don't do it. It's like, it's to our point earlier. There's so much talent in and around here, and people just come out and enjoy to play. And man,
It's insane, isn't it?
it is insane. But I love
Yeah.
that. I love the setting out there. It's beautiful out there, and the music, and the people out there, and it's so much fun to be back in Nashville. Of course, as I was sharing with you earlier, we just got back from being out for a while, but it's just awesome. So
We are
so you're
spoiled
you're
rotten living here.
yeah, you
We
can most definitely get spoiled rotten living
Yeah,
here.
the
So
quality of the music, the amount of music, it's insane. And the
yeah,
venues, think of the venues that we have right in our backyard, the Ryman Auditorium. You and I live 10 minutes from the greatest single building for live music on earth.
right.
A
And there's
sin.
ton there's tons of other smaller venues that kind of are in support of that, that
Totally.
you don't really know of, or the average person doesn't really, or the average tourist doesn't really even know of. But there's a ton. One thing I like is Americana Fest that's coming up here in another month, where they will, if you buy a ticket or you download the app, all the venues are like, and you can sit there and map out where you want to go over like a 2 week period and enjoy all kinds of music. I love that. So I'm
That's
really
my
looking forward
favorite.
to it.
That's my favorite event of all. It's so funny you mentioned that. I always describe that as my favorite week of music in this town, bar none. And the best single night of music in this town annually is the Americana Awards show at the Ryman. It's a just I can't wait.
Yeah.
I haven't missed it in years and hope to
Yeah.
never miss it. I'll
Wow.
be
So
there again this year.
last year was our first year to experience Americana Fest. Of course, being out of town, not living here for a long time, but was very fortunate to experience it. And we didn't go to the awards ceremony. We watched it from the city winery.
Uh-huh.
They dual casted it out there, and we enjoyed watching it. But yeah, that's a great week of fun, and
Yeah.
I can't wait that it's right around this perfect time of year to do it too. In
Yep.
September, it's starting to cool off just a little bit, but anyway, well, so we've spent a lot of time chatting, and I really haven't gotten to the questions here, which I'm having more fun just chatting and learning about your journey and the hurdles that have been thrown in front of you and how you've kind of overcome them. So, I mean, any entrepreneur's journey is, not unlike that. You struggle, you get slapped in the face, and then you realize, oh my gosh, I gotta do something, or I'm gonna be stuck in a spot that I don't want to be in. But what's my purpose in life? How do I find my purpose? How do I make it something that I can, be proud of, and be happy and satisfied in pursuit of, and all of that kind of comes out in your story, which is, very intriguing to me. So I appreciate you sharing all that with us, and enjoyed spending the time talking about it. So I have a question here. What is your company's or yours bigger than life vision or purpose for being in existence? Can you maybe expand on that beyond what it is we've
Sure.
learned about today?
Yeah, one of the things I love about being a headhunter is I have an opportunity every day to really materially impact other people's lives. So,
Hmm.
in other words, as a headhunter, my job is to find great people for my client job openings. So,
Hmm.
I'll give you a real example. Um, Company X comes to me looking for a CFO. My job is to go survey, vet dozens of prospects to find a short list of maybe 3 or 4 perfectly matched CFOs, and then introduce those people to the client, let them interview them, ultimately hire one, right?
Hmm.
Well, in every one of those conversations, I have an opportunity to help a dozen, 15, 20, 25 other CFOs improve their resumes, to improve their chances of finding that next great job. The candidate that gets the offer, gets the job, I may have really turned that candidate's life around. Maybe
Hmm.
they were in financial straits, or maybe they had to have this job for whatever reason. But the fact is, that person is now in a great job. They're making a great living. They're supporting their family. They're thriving. I get Christmas cards from people like that every single year. People that I placed in jobs 15 years ago. Hey, Tom, still at XYZ. Thanks to you. Love you. Whatever. I
Awesome.
get such a warm and fuzzy about that. So I
Mhm.
have an opportunity to really help people. And
Yeah.
it's fun. It fills me up.
Yeah. And when I hear that in your voice there, it is definitely something that you can be moved by, and there's no question you're changing people's lives in that role. And you talk about the candidates' lives you're changing, but you're also making an impact if there's a good match, right, with the company itself and the people
Oh,
who
heck
are,
yeah.
yeah. So there's a lot of people you're affecting in that way. So thanks for sharing that. Um, so in your role, tell us about the daily routine of a highly productive business owner, or in your case, a CEO. Turnkey, just to be clear, right, is or maybe you can share with us your role at Turnkey and how
All
that
right.
and how do you what is a daily routine in your role?
So a
As
little bit about Turnkey. Turnkey is a 25-year-old search firm that is most well known for dominating the world of sports. In other words, we are the Mercedes-Benz of sports recruitment. When I say recruitment in sports, I'm talking about the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, US Olympic Committee, Augusta National. We have a college division that places big time college football coaches, athletic administrators, ADs, big time, high
Mhm.
level, high profile sports stuff. Um, I run music for that company. And the reason why I landed at Turnkey was 3 years ago, an article ran in Variety magazine about me. And on the heels of that article running, 3 different search firms reached out to strike up a conversation about possibly hiring me. When
Mhm.
Turnkey called, I was blown away because I knew of Turnkey. I respected Turnkey. I knew who they were in terms of dominating sports. And the synergy between music and sports is literally like peas and carrots.
Mhm.
And they made me an offer to come launch or build a music practice housed inside of the sports executive recruitment company. It was a fast yes, and it was the smartest thing I've ever done. Um, so I am blessed to be where I am. Did I mention I'm the luckiest guy you know? That's just maybe the most recent example. Um, Now, your question about my daily routine, Craig, I am a slave to my schedule. And
Mhm.
this is something I learned at Southwestern selling books door to door during my college vacations. Your schedule is the lifeblood of your success.
Mhm.
I get out of bed in the morning. I'm excited to read about my industry. because again, I'm doing what I love. I'm enamored with the music industry. So my first thing that I do in the morning is I read a number of different periodicals about the music industry.
Mhm.
You know, Billboard magazine, Polestar magazine, Rolling Stone, a number of newsletters that I get, Music Business Worldwide. I'm consuming that information because I need to be an expert on all those things, right? Well,
Mhm.
just so happens I'm really interested in that stuff. So it doesn't feel like work, but I get out of bed every morning at 5:30. I don't use an alarm clock to wake up. I've been doing it this way for so long. I'm programmed, but I make a cup of coffee, I feed the dog, and I sit down and turn on Squawk Box and I start reading about what's going on in my industry.
Mhm.
And an hour goes by, I take my shower, and then I go to work. I'm usually at my desk by about 7:45 every morning without fail. And I work some days 12 hours, some days 8 hours, some days 4 hours. It really depends
Mhm.
on what's on the agenda that day. But that routine is what I start with. And sadly, it happens on the weekends too. I'm not one of those guys that can sleep in on the weekends as much as I wish I could. I get up at 5:30, maybe 5:45 on Saturday,
Mhm.
but I do the same thing on Saturday that I do on Tuesday. I read about what happened in the music business last night,
Yeah.
and I am what I am.
Yeah. 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 Routine is, pretty important. And, having a pretty, you said you were a slave to your calendar. So I'm sure you've got the time throughout the days are pretty well organized and structured for you, right?
Oh, if something doesn't land on my calendar, it never happens. In other
Yeah.
words, if you and I talk about having lunch next Thursday, if it doesn't get on my calendar, you're going to show up at the restaurant on time and you're going to go, "Where the hell is Truitt?" And you're going to call me and go, "Oh shit, Craig, it's not on my calendar. I'm so sorry."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I'm a slave to my calendar.
Right. I hear you. Um, well, tell us about, and you've already talked about some of the challenges in your life, but tell us about some hardest moments that you've experienced, maybe throughout your career or here at Truitt or at your current company.
Hardest moment.
What are the hardest moments?
Sometimes it's frustrating when a client meaning a company, it wants to go down one path and maybe hire a person in a search.
Hmm.
And I truly feel in my heart of hearts they're making a mistake.
Hmm.
And I sometimes wrestle with telling them, no, you shouldn't do that. Yeah, I know you want to hire candidate A, you really ought to hire candidate G. Um, and so I have to really advocate for that. And sometimes that conversation doesn't go as well as I'd like it to.
Hmm.
Sometimes the client will still hire candidate A and it'll work out great. And they even tease me about it, down the road. Hey, Tom, you told us not to do that. Well, candidates thrive. I go, hey, you're right. You're right. Sometimes, on the other hand, I'm right. And so
Hmm.
it's frustrating.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't work. In other words, sometimes the candidate is hired and for whatever reason, the business turns, or maybe it's not as good of a cultural fit as we hoped. And the candidate doesn't last, but 9 months, 12 months,
Hmm.
2 years. That I want a candidate to stick for the next 10 years, right?
Hmm.
But sometimes, due to forces way beyond my control or the company's control or the candidate's control, it doesn't work out that way. That's
Hmm.
frustrating because I
Hmm.
always second guess myself. What could I have done differently? Could
Right.
I have prevented that from happening? But
Yeah.
that's the real world, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that so your clients, uh, ignorant me, naiveness, I guess. I've, I guess your clients look to you for your input on which of the candidates you recommend. Is that kind of a common, is that common?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, they're hiring my expertise. They're hiring my knowledge, my domain expertise, my ability to read between the lines. I've been called the candidate whisperer before by multiple clients, and what they're saying and what I'm saying by using that term is I can really get to the marrow of a candidate.
Mm.
I know how to read people. I know how to understand the nuances of what they're saying, and I can
Mhm.
really identify who they are at their molecular level almost. And if a company doing the hiring is going the wrong way, or they're going to hire one candidate over another, I may second guess them. I may say, wait a minute, have you thought about this? Or I want you to take another look at this person.
Mm.
Um, so at the end of the day, that they're hiring me to do that. They're not
Yeah.
hiring me just to give them 5 resumes and then let them figure it out on their own. Although
Right.
I do have clients that do want to operate that way. They're like, no, Tom, we want you to just put the buffet out. We'll select what we want off the buffet.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
ultimately, I have to abide by that because they're the client. They're going to do what they want to do.
Right. Right. Well, and they're missing out too on your experience and your
In
ability
some
to do that.
cases,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so on to the next question then. Tell me, yeah, so here's a question about a book about I mean you do a lot of reading every morning, right? About
I
the
do.
business industry. What's the one book that you read earlier in your career that has served as a bedrock for you that you've gone back to and referred to time and time again?
That's an easy one.
Yeah.
There's two really. The first one is called "The Greatest Salesman in the World"
Hmm.
by a guy named Og Mandino. It's a very quick read. I think it's 100 pages long, but it is one of the most interesting stories about being a sales professional. It's
Hmm.
it's it's told in a narrative around 10 different themes, but I
Hmm.
highly recommend it to anyone, not just salespeople, but any person that wants to go into business. Called "The Greatest Salesman in the World" by Og Mandino. The second one is a much more current book, or more recent book, I guess, by Malcolm Gladwell, "The Tipping Point."
Hmm.
The Tipping Point is one of the most fascinating business books you'll ever read, and it's one of my favorites. And there's so many interesting nuggets in there about what causes a rote or mundane thing to become a phenomenon. That what tips it? What is the tipping point of something going from here to here?
Hmm.
It's a fascinating book to read. I recommend both of those to anybody.
Oh wow. Yeah, I've heard of the tipping point. Uh, that's
Trust me.
probably within how long? But like within the last maybe
It,
5, 10,
no, probably 15. Yeah.
15? Okay.
Malcolm Gladwell, highly recommend. Craig, you'll love it. You'll thank me.
Yeah. Okay.
Highly
Well,
recommend it.
there's tons of books to read. I'm always interested in what other people are reading. So I'll
It
pick both of those up.
well, it's an entertaining read. It's
Hmm.
informative, but it's entertaining. You don't feel like you're reading a college textbook.
Right. Right. Right.
It's not that at all.
Yeah. Right. Great. So, wow. So this has been a great conversation. And I'm looking over here, like maybe we should just consider one more question for you. And this is probably a good one to end it on. Uh, if you, and I think I might know the question. I might know the answer to this question already, but I'm going to ask it. If you could do it all over again, what would you change or do differently?
Wow, that's loaded. Um, I wouldn't do anything differently. However, I do wish I had figured it out earlier.
Mm.
In other words, it took me till I was age 40 to really figure out what I'm most passionate about, and that's the
Mhm.
music business. I wish somehow, some way, I had figured that out at 20,
Mhm.
because who knows how productive I might be today. Hell, I might be retired sitting on a big boat somewhere in the Bahamas today had I
Mhm.
figured it out earlier. Who knows?
Mhm.
And that's the thing I preach to young people all the time. If you can figure out what you are most passionate about and then figure out a way to make a living doing that, you'll never feel like you're working a day of your life.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier said than done, but I'm the luckiest guy because I figured it out finally.
Yeah. Well, you figured it out, I would say, and plus had the fortitude to persevere through those hurdles that were laid out in front of you, and realize your dream, right? Realize your vision, realize your passion. So congratulations to you, man.
Thank you.
I'm
I'm the
happy for
luckiest
you.
guy you know.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's been a pleasure talking to you and getting to learn about your history, and learning more about the music business, and right here in the middle of good old Nashville. It's been, gosh, inspiring to me to talk to you. So,
Thank you.
yes,
I'm so appreciative of the ask, and I'm willing to go further if you want. And I hope your listeners benefit from this somehow, some way. And I hope to meet you in person sometime soon, maybe at a concert,
yeah,
maybe
that
at a
would be
round
awesome.
Americana Fest.
Yeah,
Let's make
that
a
would be
plan.
fantastic. All right,
I'll be
Tom.
there.
Okay,
Thank you,
man.
Craig.
Have a good
Pleasure.
day. See ya.
Cheers.
Bye.